Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's a beautiful day and it's Sunday morning. I heard there are additional COVID cases is actually happening in Butuan City according to the DOS Caraga region update. Well, my topic for today is all about speaking skills in Ielts, International English Language Teaching System. There are four macro skills in English language. These are the reading, listening, writing, and speaking. A hint for a teacher going abroad. He or she must have passed those four bands in order to obtain an IELTS certificate. Probably this is a ticket or a proof that you have passed all the requirements for teaching abroad. One of the speaking, one of the skills that you are going to pass is the speaking test ability. I'll teach you and I'll give you a tips on how to pass speaking test skills. Okay, are you ready? I have to be quick because my camera is actually limiting my time. I don't know what's going on. The speaking test takes between 11 and 14 minutes. It consists of an oral interview between one candidate and an examiner. There are three parts. Each part is different in terms of the type interaction, the task input, and the type of response. In part 1, the candidates answer general questions about themselves, their homes, their families, their jobs, studies, and their interests, and a range of similar familiar topic areas. This part lasts between 4 and 5 minutes. That is in part 1. Because there are three structure of the speaking test skills if you are taking IELTS. We have to introduction and interview. The part 2 is the individual long term, and part 3 is the two-way discussion by the employer on the examiner. In part 2, the candidate is given a task card and is asked to talk on a particular topic. The candidate has 1 minute to prepare before speaking up to 2 minutes. Of course, you will be given a time, at least a minute, to prepare yourself to answer the question. The examiner then asks one or two rounding up questions. There are two rounding up questions. Now take note of that. In part 3, the examiner and candidate engage in a discussion of more abstract issues. Abstract issues, take note, and ideas which are related to topic from in part 2. Of course, the topic must be consistent, persistent from part 1 up to part 3. The discussion lasts between 4 and 5 minutes in part 3. So, take note that all interviews are recorded, and you will be assessed and be graded after the after you have given all those tasks. There are three structured speaking tests. These are the part 1, part 2, part 3. Now, in part 1, which is introduction and interview, examiner introduces himself or herself and confirms candidate's identity. That is the nature of interaction. Examiner interviews candidates using verbal questions selected from familiar topic frames. Now, you will be given only 4 to 5 minutes. I don't know this time. Maybe they will give you 10 minutes. In part 2, the nature of their interaction goes like this. Examiner asks candidate to speak for 1 to 2 minutes. Take note, 1 to 2 minutes on a particular topic based on written input in the form of candidate task card with content focused prompts. Examiner asks 1 or 2 more questions to round off the long turn. Now, take note that there will be a follow-up questions by the examiner. Usually, it only takes 3 to 5 minutes. In part 3, there are two-way discussion. The examiner invites candidate to participate in discussion of a more abstract nature based on questions thematically linked to part 2 topic. As I told you, the topic must be within the core of the structure of the speaking skills. In speaking test practice, this is what we call part 1. Let's talk about where you grew up. Now, these are only the questions that you expect. Describe the town or city where you grew up. I repeat, describe the town or city where you grew up. Another question is, do you still live there now? Do you still live there now? Does your family still live there? Does your family still live there? Do you think the place has changed much since you were young, and how? Now, those are the questions, expected questions from the part 1. I don't know if it changed. Actually, there is a demand of change, but usually, normally, this is probably the beginning of your speaking skills. In part 2, the candidate must be given a task card. Describe a sports event you enjoyed watching. That is the questions from the examiner. Now you should say, you have to just to take note at least the 4 W's. What, where, who, and why. Okay. Probably it goes like this. What event you watch? Now you have to answer it. You have to be quick. Where you were, or where were you at the time you watched that sports in television? Who you watched it with? And then you have to explain why you enjoyed watching it. Okay. Now you will have to talk about the topic for 1 to 2 minutes. You have only 1 minute to think about what you are going to say. Anyway, the examiner will actually give you at least 1 minute to prepare yourself to speak. You can make some notes to help you if you wish. Just like me, I cannot speak without keywords. Just like now, I must have keywords before I have to deliver my statement or my sentence. Otherwise, I'll be misleading. So that's why it's very important to have your keyword. Now, the rounding of questions happen in part 2. Who won this event? Who won this event? Since the topic is all about sports. Do you play this sport yourself? Do you play this sport yourself? So that is in part 2, especially if you are taking IELTS. Now, this is the last part of speaking skills. Part 3. Let's consider first of all what's a sport. Remember, I give you a hint that the topic must be from part 1, part 2, and part 3. It's all related, consistent, and just be spontaneous of your answer. Let's consider first of all what's a sport. How expensive is it to go to sports events in your country? I repeat, how expensive is it to go to sports events in your country? For an examiner, hindi na nila inuulit yung mga katanungan. Yeah, you have to be focused. Do you think it's different watching a sports event on TV and going to watch it in person? In what ways? I repeat, do you think it's different watching a sports event on TV and going to watch it in person? In what ways? So those are the questions. Another follow-up questions, which is also happening in the last part, which is the two-way discussion. Do you think there's too much sport on TV? Why? Do you think there's too much sports on TV? Why? So those are the questions that you have to pay attention and be sure that you can answer those questions accurately, systematically, of course with your grammar. Finally, let's talk about famous sports people. These are the following. This is the follow-up questions, the last questions that the examiner should ask you. That will ask you at the time you are taking your IELTS speaking skills. Why do you think sports people often become media stars today? Why do you think sports people often become media stars today? So those are the questions from part 1, part 2, part 3. If you are taking IELTS and if you wish to go to abroad, you must have an IELTS certificate. These are the certified certificate given by United British Council of Teachers. Some parts of also in Australia and New Zealand. It's all honored. They're all ISO. So thank you for today. Thank you for listening. Good luck to your application, and probably to my students, you can also get some of the information of my discussion today. So thank you so much.